King Kong movie sequels suck. Welcome back to Binge Warmers. My name is Hopper. It's not hard to like King Kong. He's a big ape. He's hairy. He likes pretty women. He's just like me for real. Whenever you think about King Kong, it's usually him swatting down airplanes or falling off the Empire State Building to his death. Beauty killed the beast and all that. That's why throughout the years, Kong has been a one-movie monkey instead of a series simian. That's so stupid. There are actually a few Kong sequels. This iconic ape is still relevant today, but I was surprised to find there were only 5 live-action American films before the Legendary Pictures MonsterVerse took off. If you look at other movie monsters like Dracula or Frankenstein, they have a massive library of films. They may not all be winners, but I still wonder why King Kong didn't get the same treatment as those other guys. Well, today I'm going to look at some of the sequels that Kong did get and kind of explain why they didn't really start a series. I'll also talk about what works about these films as well. I'm not here just to critique. I do have a heart. And let me say this right off the bat too, I do love the MonsterVerse and Kong. He's in the thumbnail just because we're going to talk about Godzilla vs. Kong, but it's nothing against him or to say his movies suck. I don't think that. I'm just, it just makes the thumbnail look better, okay? It should also be noted that this Kong is successful in having a series. Godzilla Kong, The New Empire is the first time a Kong has been on screen 3 movies in a row, so that's really cool. And congrats to Legendary on finally picking up the monkey into a series. Oh, also, I'm not talking about King Kong Escapes because while it is clearly the same Kong from King Kong vs. Godzilla, technically it's a loose adaptation of the Rankin Bass series, The King Kong Show. We'll save all that for another day. Okay, let's go monkey mode. Before we get into its sequel, let me first just kind of talk a little bit about King Kong and why I love it so much. I saw it at a very young age, very formative age, and it had a huge impact on me. It's still probably in my top 5 films of all time. It's one of Hollywood's great movies. It pioneered several visual effects techniques that were used for years to come. There are several documentaries and YouTube videos on Willis O'Brien's work, and I will just say it's a marvel that it looks so good. Before you get all in my comments saying, it's black and white, it doesn't look good, or stop motion's so bad, I want you to know this was made in a depression, okay? The man was working with whatever he had, clay and hopes and dreams. Just leave him alone. It looks awesome to me, okay? I just respect the filmmakers so much because they used creativity to pull this off. They didn't have computers or CGI or anything to help along the way. Anyway, this movie has a gripping story. It has emotion, action, adventure, violence, romance, terror. It's all there. I probably don't even need to recap the plot for you. You know this. Filmmaker Carl Denham finds Ann Darrow, a young beautiful woman, down on her luck because it's the Great Depression. He takes her and his crew to an uncharted island to make a movie. They find dinosaurs and King Kong. Kong falls for Ann because who wouldn't? And he takes her deep into the jungle. He did kidnap her, but he is protecting her from worse threats like dinosaurs. Denham then exploits Kong's love of Ann and brings him back to New York to sell tickets to see him. Kong breaks out, finds Ann, climbs the Empire State Building, hits the planes, they shoot him down, Beauty killed the beast, all that. Okay, yada yada. Now let's talk. Also, Beauty didn't kill the beast. The planes killed that beast, but it's about love and Beauty versus the beast, and it's the theme of the movie, I guess, but the planes got him. The planes won, Kong 0. Let's just get that straight. Anyway, now that I gushed a little bit, let's talk about the sequel, Son of Kong. The sequel came out only 9 months after the original, the same year. That is super impressive. The only other sequels I can think of that do that are X and Pearl and maybe like the Matrix sequels. There are probably more examples, but it's still very impressive. Also, I believe this is the first Son of sequel movie, followed by the likes of Son of Frankenstein, Son of Dracula, and Son of a Bitch, You're Ugly. I'm just kidding. I love Manila, but he's no looker, let's be honest. If you watch Kong and Son of Kong back to back, like I did, you'll notice a significant downgrade in quality. That's because allegedly co-directors Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack went to the studio RKO asking for a bigger, more adventurous film, but were only given half the budget of the last film. This is your first red flag. Sequels should always be more big, and not always, but sequels like this should always be bigger and more adventurous than the last one, especially when it did so well because of those elements. Instead, we get a smaller, more comedic film. Scriptwriter Ruth Rose allegedly said she intentionally made it a smaller, funnier script because it wasn't going to top the first film anyway. I think I could have, with the right mindset, really enjoyed a Son of Kong film where it's not Kong, but it's more about his offspring. I actually kind of like what they did make. It brings back some of the cast of the first film and expands their characters. It makes Robert Armstrong's Carl Denham more likable. In this one, he's getting sued for damages caused by Kong, so he meets back up with Captain Englehorn and they try to start a cargo business. The movie then takes this weird side quest to show monkeys playing music and introduce Denham's love interest. And when I first watched it, they have a 23-year age gap, so I was like, oh, he's going to be like a fatherly mentor figure. No, that's his love interest, and it's just old Hollywood, I guess. That would happen a lot. Anyway, Denham and Englehorn meet the man who sold Denham the map to Skull Island from the first film. He tells them about a hidden treasure on the island, and they team up. But the crew betrays them because they don't want to go on the island. Yeah, who could blame them, honestly? So our main group of characters finally go to the island, and they find a younger albino gorilla. He's stuck in quicksand, so they help him out of there. I wonder if that's where all the other Kongs went. They got stuck in the quicksand, couldn't get out. Probably not. This ape, nicknamed Kiko during the production process, but just called Little Kong in the actual movie, returns the favor and saves our characters from harm. This is a green flag, in my opinion, as far as sequels go, because this, gives you a younger, friendlier ape that can grow and change with our characters, and also be a friendly force instead of kind of a creepy, terrifying force that'll kidnap Andero. Anyway, he dies at the end of the movie. But they can go back to Skull Island, right? Nope, it sinks too. I know I cut that short, but that's basically how it ends. They find the treasure, there's more betrayal, the island undergoes some natural disaster, and then it starts sinking under the water. Little Kong gets his foot trapped, but he holds Denham out of the water to be rescued. So I liked a lot of this, honestly. It's a good epilogue for the first film, even though I'm not crazy about there being a random younger gorilla on Skull Island. It makes Kong seem less empathetic if there was someone for him to pal around with. Whether it was his son or not, whether there was a female mother gorilla, that even, that's not even mentioned, so we don't even know about that. The human characters do get expanded on, and I like that part of the story. Denham helps the Little Kong because of his past wrongdoings. And the effects are still fairly good, even if they aren't quite on par with the OG movie. I like Kiko a lot. He's a sweet little guy, and he stays loyal and helps his friends to the end. Also, he can scrap just like his old man. He tears up a bear and other dinosaurs. Honestly, this movie could have had several sequels, but just like the first one, they killed the Kong off. Plus, it didn't help that they sunk the island, so even if there was another gorilla out there, we're not going to see him or her. Personally, I think this could have had another sequel. Kind of have it lean into the tomb raiding, kind of adventure, treasure-seeking aspect of it. Indiana Jones with a giant ape kind of a thing. But no, they sink the island. They kill off the monkey. He's not necessarily dead. He just went underwater, so he could have freed himself. We don't know. But there's no island to go back to. He's probably not going to survive. Okay, we're moving right along to King Kong 1976. This movie is extremely similar to the 33 version, but this time around an oil ship comes to an undocumented island for oil. Go figure. Jeff Bridges plays a character named Jack Prescott, who is a primate paleontologist who sneaks aboard to warn against going to the island. They find Jessica Lange's Dwan on a raft, and she's an aspiring actress just like Andero from the first film. This makes me wonder why they haven't done an American Horror Story on Skull Island. Anyway, from there, it's pretty much the same story without the dinosaur fights. It is way more hornies, though, in typical 70 fashion. And it has that vibrant red blood. Oh, and Kong scales the World Trade Center. Probably the second worst thing. I'm not going to... I don't need to do that. When I was watching it, it kind of reminded me of Christopher Lee's Hammer Dracula films. They're both updates to older films with a crazy horny tone and vibrant red blood. Speaking of red blood, Kong bleeds a lot in this movie, but it's okay. Kong lives. I'm not going to spend too much time on this movie because this video is about the sequels. It's sort of the middle child of Kong movies. It's not as iconic as the 33 version, but not as cinematic or interesting as the 2005 version. It does have pretty awesome special effects done by Carlo Rambaldi and the legendary Rick Baker, famous for American Werewolf in London, and he also worked on Gremlins 2. This time around, stop motion is traded in for rubber suits, but they keep the model hands. This really sells that the two characters are in the same space. It worked pretty well. It sort of reminded me of the Godzilla films of the same era. This film also does some interesting character work with Dwan being sad about Kong's death. You really feel that she cared for Kong, and he only wanted to love her and not hurt her. She wants to hurt him, though. She punched him right in the face. No, I should probably just talk about the sequel, but it is very boring. Okay, like I mentioned, King Kong Lives is the name of the sequel, and no surprise to anybody, he dies again at the end of it. It starts with Linda Hamilton's Dr. Franklin making an artificial heart for Kong, and he needs a blood transfusion. Like I already told you guys, he lost a lot of blood in that first movie. Anyway, Brian Kerwin's Hank Mitchell finds a Lady Kong, conveniently, how about that? And they actually have a similar relationship to Dwan or Anne in King Kong. She likes him a lot. Okay, at this point, I want to take a brief detour to kind of talk about this movie called Queen Kong that I found. It was scheduled to come out in 1976 alongside the Kong remake, and the copyright holders put a stop to it because this is before parody law came into existence. It is essentially just that, a parody of the original film. It swaps the gender roles of the Kong and the main character. I watched it at a morbid interest. You can find it online, and it's about as funny as like a bad Monty Python sketch.
Below the belt.
Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the official King Kong sequel suspiciously borrowed ideas, however small, from a crappy parody film that they took legal action against. Anyway, they bring the female Kong a little too close to a revived King Kong, and he goes apey. He carries her off into the woods, and this is kind of nice to see. Kong finally has a girl his own height. And they waste no time either, as we later find out they have a baby. But before all that, they capture the female Kong. By the way, she doesn't get a name or like even a nickname besides Lady Kong. She strikes me as like a Sandy. A Barbara, maybe? I think Barbara is what I want to call her. So King Kong then bonks his noodle and is presumed dead, even though no one can find his body. He survives off eating alligators and then rescues his lady. Mitchell secures a reserve where they first found Barbara, a different island that was not connected to Skull Island. But it was at this point I realized, oh, it's about conservation. The whole time I'm like, why are they trying to revive Kong? He's a menace. He's trying to steal women, run up the towers, get shot at, you know, typical Friday night. Anyway, typical fashion, they shoot him down again, but he pretty well takes them out with him. Anyway, Kong now has a son, and Barbara and Kong Jr. live in the reserve. This movie flopped hard. It lost lots of money, and it did leave things open for a Son of Kong type remake eventually. Even though this timeline is pretty grounded, and without dinosaurs, I don't even think I'm interested. Frankly, I thought this movie was boring, and I'm glad it was the last of the series. The human characters are kind of likable in their own ways, if not bland. It is nice to see Kong get along with another of his species. Look at him putting the moves on her. Oh yeah, there's also a scene I forgot to mention where a bunch of rednecks corner Kong, and they're just kind of tormenting him for a little while, and then he freaks out, and then he snaps one of them in half, and he eats the other one. It's pretty clear to see why this didn't spawn another sequel. It was a bad flop, and you killed Kong, even if you did put a little baby to replace him. Okay, now I'm not going to spend a lot of time on 2005 Kong because it didn't actually get a sequel, but there was a very convincing featurette where Peter Jackson and some of the crew talk about their version of a Son of Kong.
So one of the things we're going to have to do is on the shoulders of the gorilla, we want to mount a couple of Browning machine guns.
It would have been a two-parter that takes place during World War II, and it would have had the Kong fighting Nazi monsters. They even did some preliminary work, but it was an April Fool's Day joke. This got me, you know, if the same cast and crew were involved and Peter Jackson was heading the whole thing, I'm in. Kong fighting Nazis, let's do it. Okay, we're circling the reason why I wanted to do this video. I just want to talk about the MonsterVerse for a minute. I think Kong's involvement is what makes this a cinematic universe. If it was just Godzilla, that's just a whole film series on its own. We get two powerhouse monsters in there, boom, cinematic universe goals. Okay, Godzilla vs. Kong is technically a sequel to Godzilla King of the Monsters and Kong Skull Island, which is technically a prequel to Godzilla 2014. Cinematic universe, you get it, right? I'll save the Godzilla stuff for another day, so let's just talk about Skull Island and why Godzilla vs. Kong is a good sequel. So Skull Island sets itself apart from other Kong movies because it does something different. For the first time in 84 years, they don't kill the f***ing monster at the end of the movie. What a crazy concept. Skull Island also sets itself apart by having an interesting plot that mirrors the Vietnam War. And it does a good job making Kong out to be a sympathetic protector. We learn that his family is dead and he looks after the local Iwis. Anyway, the Iwis are vulnerable to the skull crawlers, and Kong lost his family to the same monsters. This Kong is pretty likable and complex. I think he is the most human out of all the other Kongs. We learn he can sign in the sequel, and it makes a lot of sense. This movie also has an insane cast. Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, John C. Reilly, and John Goodman. Some of their characters die, but I wish we got to see more of them. Especially Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson. I think they are so good in this. Maybe we'll get some more of them in Monarch Season 2. So the plot basically revolves around John Goodman lying to get a team to the island, and Kong humbles them right away. He's like, I know planes and helicopters got me before. Not anymore. I'm too big for that. I do have to fight Godzilla after all. The rest of the movie is basically just the main characters discovering that Kong is not so bad while they're trying to leave the island. They have to avoid skull crawlers and other creepy crawlies in the jungle. This was a welcome change of pace for me, personally, after the 2014 Godzilla. Now, I like that movie, but this is closer to what I want out of a kaiju movie. It is different from the rest of the Kong films, but Kong still has the same gruff but protective personality. He even holds Brie Larson in his hand while he rips out the entrails of a skull crawler. That's peak King Kong right there. Anyway, the follow-up, Kong vs. Godzilla, only builds on Kong's character. He's more protective of a young deaf girl in this one. This puts him in more of like a fatherly type role, if anything else. This replaces his like love for beauty type of thing. It's a little bit of a change, but I think it's sweet, and I hope they keep this relationship going for the rest of the series. In this movie, from Kong's perspective, he is held captive due to a permanent storm on Skull Island and is only free when he finds the Hollow Earth. In this timeline, alpha titans like Kong and Godzilla can sense each other, and they decide to fight for supremacy. So when they finally have to move Kong to find the Hollow Earth, Godzilla of course senses him right away. I think this is one of the best fight scenes in the whole series, and I also think this kind of illustrates why Kong is such an interesting character. He plays dead, and then in his next encounter with Godzilla, he uses tools, which shows that he's even smarter than we thought he was before. Anyway, Godzilla kind of wins, and then he gets smacked by Mechagodzilla, and Kong gets revived to help out. Now they're buddies. Maybe, maybe not. But Kong does end the film free. He's living in the Hollow Earth and life is good. I'm so glad they haven't killed Kong off yet. He deserves happiness and he deserves freedom. Like, he's free in the end of this movie, and he's not free from the mortal coil. He's still with us, but he's there primed for a sequel. So now we can talk a little bit about Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. This movie is not out yet, but I can already tell they're borrowing concepts from past sequels. Turns out there are more Kongs than we thought, sort of like in Kong Lives. And there's even a little Kong, like in Son of Kong. You even have humans backing up Kong by giving him an artificial body part, just like in the beginning of Kong Lives. It's awesome how a new film can use bits of older films as reference and even foundations as material for a new sequel. Part of me wonders if Godzilla and Kong are linked in the MonsterVerse now, or if there's hope for a Kong-specific sequel. Only time will tell. Anyways, I'm glad Kong is relevant again in such a nice way. It kind of shows you, like, throughout the decades, he's been kind of at the forefront of movie technology. He started out as stop motion, then he went to a rubber suit, then he was a mocap. Mocapped? what is that? I know that's like the little ping pong balls and they do the computer technology, but I don't know. I'm not sure what the verb of that is. They mocapped him in there. Andy Serkis mocapped him in there. I don't know. Now he's part of a cinematic universe. It just feels right. It feels like he's there for every level of cinema. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's about all I've got to say. Continue watching, guys. We're going to talk a little bit about Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. We'll probably talk about it on our live stream we do on Saturdays. It's called Beyond the Bench. If you're following this channel for our Ben 10 podcast, please help us get to 1,000 subscribers. We're trying to eat some of Grandpa Max's food if we get to 1,000 subscribers by September 1st. Let me know in the comment section below if you're excited for Godzilla Kong or if you want just another Kong-specific movie. Anyway, I've gushed enough and I'm sure you're ready to go, so I will see you in the next one. Keep on binging.